Hi, welcome to Get In, the connected vehicle podcast from BlackBerry. I'm your host, Steve Kovsky, and in this series, we'll be diving into what the future of transportation just might look like. Today, I'm joined by a guest from overseas who is going to take us on a deep dive into the world of finance and how it applies to the cars of the future.
Thanks, Steve. So my name is Brendan Gleeson. I am the Chief Strategy Officer for Solifi. Prior to that, I spent 5 years as the global CEO of the White Clark Group. We're a specialist automotive finance software solution provider, which has since been acquired by Solifi.
I understand from what we've discussed in short form that there's been some changes in how cars are financed and how banks work with the automotive industry. Can you tell us a little bit more about Solifi?
So with over 300 customers globally, Solifi is the leading global provider of SaaS solutions to the secured finance sector, offering market-leading applications, particularly in the automotive finance space, covering all aspects of the automotive finance business, including retail, fleet, and wholesale. So we've got a broad spectrum of experiences in that market. And our customers, some of them, our customers would include the leading OEMs in the world, some of the world's leading banks, and indeed independent finance companies.
I see. Now, something we like to ask our guests, it gives us a sense of our shared experience, I guess, is what their first experience was in an automobile or with automobiles, driving an automobile. And I think yours was a bit different than mine. Could you describe it a little bit?
Sure. So I grew up, but you can probably tell from the accent, I grew up in rural Ireland and we didn't have a car. Neither of my parents knew how to drive. That was fairly common for the families on our housing estate. I'm one of, it was a family of 12, so we wouldn't have been buying a car. We'd have to buy a small bus instead. But back in those days, the Irish economy wasn't anything like it is now. So it just wasn't affordable. That's the actual truth. We got around on bicycles and walked or whatever. So I got my first car after I left college, went to get my first job, and then I bought a secondhand. I believe it was a red Nissan Micra. However, and I was delighted with it. Obviously, it gave me freedom I just didn't have. And at that point, the economy had turned around, and everybody had a car, and in fact, families had two cars. However, probably more interestingly is my mother actually learned to drive at the ripe old age of 60, and now unfortunately she had polio as a child, and she had lost one of her kneecaps, so she had one leg was straight. So actually, any kind of transport was actually quite difficult for her, and even walking would have been difficult. Not that it ever bothered her. She managed to get by quite fine. So we decided we'd get her a car because she was, I want the freedom. And we think, gosh, you're too old. And, this is going to be just really hard. Anyway, we ended up buying a Renault, I'm sure it was, and it had the clutch on the dashboard. So she could do that with her hand and operate it. So, and for her, actually, it was quite amazing to see. She saw the ability to be able to go wherever she wanted, whenever she wanted, as tremendous freedom that she had never had before. And in all seriousness, for her, the car literally was liberation. It was great.
I'm so impressed by the boldness of spirit that it took to do that. But cars are liberating for many of us, and in many ways a rite of passage. That hasn't changed, but there's a lot that has changed, especially in the last few years, and it seems to really have accelerated. Could you talk about some of the challenges that the industry is facing right now, and how you're helping them cope with those challenges?
Yeah, sure. The auto finance industry is going through one of the most disruptive and challenging periods in its entire history. And the background to that is we're operating in a world that's characterized by explosive innovation. And that means that there's a lack of predictability. So that means in turn that agility is key. So we would see enabling digital and operational agility as key drivers in our industry, and also key drivers for Solifi's products. Now, everybody in our industry today is talking about innovation. And yes, it's true that the COVID pandemic has accelerated the shift to digital channels. McKinsey's in one of the reports calls out in a very interesting statistic that showed that digital adoption went something like 25 times faster than they had planned. And that's quite a significant achievement. However, people have become a bit over-focused on it, and it isn't an overnight miracle, because I like to remind our customers of Amara's law, which states that we tend to overestimate the impact of technology in the short run and underestimate its impact in the long term. And to me, I think it would be legitimate to look at digitalization as the dot-com effect in the long run. But there's a lot more going on, and our industry today has to contend with the far more challenging digital ecosystem and a broader based digital ecosystem that exists today.
Digitalization is absolutely a huge topic in every industry. And it is interesting how it's taking shape in the automotive industry, and especially in the automotive finance. Could you talk a little bit more about the broader digital ecosystem?
It's complex, so and difficult to understand. So the way I like to come at it is to try and understand it from the interaction of three different perspectives, where we have, first you have the change in customer behavior, the changing nature of the consumer. Then we have the explosion in technology innovation, and then we have the emergence of brand new alternative business models, with security and regulation acting as something of a drag factor on innovation there.
Yeah, give us an example of each of those, if you could.
Well, maybe if I talk about it in general terms first. So most people are aware of, that there has been a shift. On the customer side, you can see the changing expectations, the shift from ownership to usership, and that's coupled with the emergence of innovative business models driving things like the subscription and sharing economies. We've also seen several significant technical innovations, everything from the cloud computing, the Internet of Things, big data, 3D printing, 4D printing, autonomous vehicles, and so on. But without a shadow of a doubt, the biggest single technology innovation we've seen has been the explosive growth of artificial intelligence and its all-pervasive application. It's everywhere today, and it's powering all sorts of applications. It's extremely, extremely powerful. So this ecosystem it is difficult for our customers to understand, indeed difficult for us to understand sometimes as well, to be truthful. And because it's not about a single dimension like digitalization, more it's about the interplay of different dimensions. So, for example, where you have the changing expectations that customers have, the changing nature of that customer, and how that is shaping digitalization, and how digitalization itself, in turn, is shaping customer behavior and expectations, and how both of those coming together are driving out and exploring and forcing the exploration of new business models in areas like subscription. And technical innovation in itself is allowing the emergence of brand new disruptive business models. One of which I think is particularly relevant today for our industry is when you look at the combination of artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things in the context of the connected vehicle and the kind of opportunities that would present for our industry.
The other thing that interests me is the idea of the change from ownership to usership. And while we've seen shared vehicles become very popular around the world, and the Ubers and Lyfts of the world, I have not seen what I've heard described in a trend is that people are getting away from wanting to own vehicles. But I have a very narrow North American view. Are you seeing it globally? Is it occurring on a larger scale, or is it still sort of a future trend?
That's a very good question, actually, because there's quite a bit of hype attached to all of this. And so if you actually look at the data now, the vehicle car sharing as opposed to subscription, they're two separate things, but they're related. Car sharing hasn't taken off that much as yet. So will it? The pandemic has had one of the effects it would have had was people would like to have their own clean, secure space that they aren't going to pick up bugs and so on. So I think it is a future. It is a thing for the future. It is happening. It's not going to go away. It does exist, but it's working better in certain sectors than it is in others. I don't think it's a North American versus European thing. I think it's more or less a case of each market is exploring it in its own way. but it has been somewhat overhyped, would be my guess. Now, if you look to the future, right out a good bit, and you say, okay, what space could I be in? I could be in a situation where I get to what would be called the robo-taxi. I could have an electrically powered vehicle that is a utility vehicle that essentially has been 3D printed, so cheap manufacturing, and it is controlled by artificial intelligence. And I could have that operating in urban areas, where I could pick you up from your house and take you to the local restaurant, whatever. And all you'd have to do is essentially like a personalized bus, for want of a better expression. So I would see that I think that is going to happen, right? How far away it is, that's anybody's guess at this stage. So that much is real. On the subscription side, there is a general trend towards subscription-based products, so Netflix and so on, the way in which people buy music and so on. So that has become that has become ingrained in the consumer that we should have a subscription offer. And trying to get that to work in the automotive finance sector has been particularly challenging. It's interesting to see the number of failures versus the number of successes.
Interesting. Well, I'm sure Solifi has a solution there that will work. And I think this is another instance where Amara is going to he's watching, he's patient. We may discount it for now, but just wait a while.
Yeah, you would, because actually, if you think about it, so EVs are becoming obviously popular. In fact, we're going to have, in the UK by 2035, then all cars that are sold will have to be EVs at that time. I can't remember what the date in the US is, but it's similar. And many of the OEMs have committed, to actually eliminating non-EV vehicles from their production within that kind of time frame. So you will see, maybe will we see. The truth is, I have a belief that actually, if you think about EVs and the state of battery technology, that it might make a lot of sense now for the battery to be made available on subscription. You can buy your car if you wish, but actually you get the battery on subscription. And as battery technology evolves and gets better, then you have the ability to swap it out. Because if I was buying an EV today, I would be worried about, I'm buying today's battery technology, and battery technology simply has to get better. If we're going to have a world of all electronic vehicles, then we have to be able to drive 600 or 700 miles on a single charge, and that's not the case today.
Very, very interesting, and that's a brilliant idea in itself. Let's talk a little bit about artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, the proliferation of data from vehicles. Help us get our head around how is this changing things?
Yeah, and I think this is a particularly important area. And it has a number of dimensions to it. So right now, I would say we're entering the era, if we're not already in the era of the software-defined vehicle, where the software and the data-driven user experiences are going to become more valuable than the vehicle itself. So that's quite an important perspective. If you're an OEM, where's your value? Is it in the car or is it in the software? And the average car produced today has something like 100 million lines of software code that comes with it, and throws off about 5 terabytes of data every hour. So that's a huge volume of data. Now, to me, that represents a huge monetization opportunity for our industry. Now, alas, the auto and auto finance industry has been not as good as other industries in terms of capitalizing on that monetization opportunity. But thankfully, the industry is waking up to the opportunity now and beginning to make some strides in that area, particularly the EV OEMs who are actually starting to capitalize on the monetization opportunities that are there. But as I said, the industry is waking up to it. All the OEMs are now thinking about it, and everybody has plans. But we've been a little bit slow, I would have said. And if we're going to get the value from the data, when you think about that volume of data, it's a huge amount. So if I say it's 5 terabytes of data being thrown off a vehicle every hour, on an 8-hour day, that's 40 terabytes. And if I have 200 million vehicles with, say, something like the IV platform installed, then I'm looking at an incredible amount of data, and it's almost impossible to manage. And this is where connected vehicle platforms like BlackBerry's Ivy come into play, and they're key at unlocking the value of that data. Because without something like Ivy, you just won't be able to manage the data. So their combination of the in-vehicle edge processing, where business value insights are derived from real-time sensor data, and where that's combined with Ivy's cloud capability. So I can get some value from within the vehicle. I can get some local processing. I can manage that data there, and then I can have those insights shared into the cloud, where I can aggregate it with the rest of the data that I've got to create even further insights and more opportunities. To me, there's a lot of potential monetization opportunities in there, not least around the area of personalization. And because of that, that's one of the reasons why we're delighted to have been invited by BlackBerry to join the Ivy Council and be the voice of the global automotive finance industry.
When you talk about monetizing data, I think people get nervous when they hear that term because they think, oh, that means they're going to sell my data.
No, I mean, there's value in the data. I mean, people are correct. I mean, there'll be constant debates about whose data is it? Does the OEM own it? Does the private individual own it? Does the finance company own it? Does the telecoms go? That's going to happen, and that will have to get resolved. And the data has value, and the consumer is waking up to the fact that they realize that their data does have value. But there are a number of opportunities that just are broadly beneficial, and I don't see data ownership getting in the way of those. Lots of opportunities, but too many to go through here. But if I call that a few, in the area of residual value optimization. So many of the automotive finance products sold today, particularly when you're talking about leasing, involve a residual value component. This is essentially when I'm selling the car or buying the car today, and I'm putting it on, say, a 2-year lease. As the finance company, I'm trying to establish what will the value of that vehicle be in 2 years' time when it comes off lease. And this is the so-called residual value. Now, it's an imperfect science. I mean, it is simply today, the processes we use are, you're predicting future value based on data models and industry norms that people are used to. However, it's not based on the actual condition of the individual vehicle. So I see quite a big opportunity here where, with something like the Ivy platform, I can establish in real time the absolute actual condition of any given vehicle. And therefore, I am able to provide a more precise description and understanding of the vehicle's condition and its value at that point in time. Now, that has a number of significant benefits, not least of which would be for a fleet manager who might have thousands of vehicles in their fleet, where this would allow them to have an up-to-minute assessment, continuous assessment of the value of that fleet. For dealers, they would have the opportunity to optimize their remarketing approach to any given vehicle based on the condition of that vehicle. You just pick which remarketing channel works for a given vehicle of a given standard. And also for the OEMs and the finance companies and the dealers, it would allow them to make far more attractive retention offers to their customers. There's a follow-on benefit to that kind of opportunity around the area of a kind of an Ivy-based Carfax, as I would call it, which means I can produce a document and an assessment of the vehicle's current condition and therefore what its current value would be at any given point in time. And I would see this as being particularly important in the digital channels, because one of the impediments to growth and the digitalization and the use of digital channels is trust and transparency are absolutely vital. Now, if I have this Carfax kind of concept and I have an accurate, up-to-the-minute, independent assessment of the value of that vehicle, then that does a lot to boost trust and transparency.
This is a trend that I have observed with my own children that are all car owners, that they are starting to, when they're looking at new vehicles, they're not just looking at buying it off a lot. They're looking at buying it from digital channels where it will arrive at their house essentially sight unseen. And you are relying on those models, which of what the car is worth, and you've got the holy Kelly Blue Book that tells you universally what that the value of the car is. This is a lot more scientific, a lot more potentially accurate.
Yeah, I mean, the key impediment to the expansion of the digital channels and driving more business through those channels is this concept of trust, because you don't know actually if it's a used vehicle, you don't know what the actual vehicle's condition actually really is, right? So you don't know what its real-time value is. With something like the Ivy platform, where the connected vehicle data allows you to establish the precise condition of that vehicle in real time at the point at which you're trying to buy or sell it, then that is going to give you a huge boost to your trust, because you've got an objective scientific assessment of the asset that you're about to purchase.
It's been eye-opening to me to learn that the revolution that's taking place technologically with the automobile is being mirrored on the financial side of the equation, and that transformation is just as revolutionary and probably just as painful for many of the parties that are involved in that. What do you see as kind of the near term? What are you excited about for the manufacturers and for customers?
So I think the residual value optimization is quite exciting. There's a number of aspects to that which we've covered, I guess, to some extent. But there's a bit more going on there, and so that's quite valuable. Another very important area in terms of what's available through this connected vehicle data is this concept of predictive maintenance. So based on the sensors that are in the vehicle, it's monitoring all the components in the vehicle. If any of those individual components look like they are deteriorating or have an increased potential to break down in the near or the medium term, then we can schedule that vehicle for early maintenance, and we can use the data in the vehicle so that we know the sensor data tells us what the condition is. We can combine that with data in the cloud that tells us what the dealer repair network has available in terms of maintenance slots, and I can pick an optimal slot for any given vehicle. And by having this preventative maintenance, I am avoiding the vehicle actually having an issue. And this has a number of significant benefits, not least of which, again, for fleet managers, this concept of minimizing the off-the-road downtime. So if I've got preventative maintenance available to me, that will help me minimize the off-the-road downtime, which is a critical metric in the fleet sector. This will also feed into lower overall maintenance costs and finance costs. And indeed, a better maintained vehicle is just going to have a higher resale value anyway, so everybody benefits. There's also a safety benefit associated with this. If I have a well-maintained vehicle where I am preventing it from having a breakdown, so it's not going to break down while it's in use, then I'm likely to experience fewer accidents, and that in turn should lead to lower insurance costs. Now, there's a whole host of areas that I would say, where there are a bunch of different opportunities that would be available, and covering, if you like, different areas. So, for example, pay per use is a really good one in my mind, and some of this you see in action today with people like Tesla. So, I could, as a consumer, as the driver of the vehicle, decide that I want heated seats today because it's a bit chilly, right? I can have that for the day that I wanted and only pay for that day's usage. I'm not having to buy heated seats up front, when I got the vehicle. Another one I've seen Tesla use is because their batteries are software controlled, so you can buy extended range. So what that means is that I can have an over-the-air update to my vehicle. So in real time, this is I'm off for the weekend. I'm going to go on a long road trip, and I'd like to be able to get extra mileage out of my battery. I purchased that for the weekend that I'm going to use it. I get an over-the-air update, and my vehicle now has extended range. I think it's brilliant. There's a whole pile of things that can be sold on that kind of concept. Another one you see is pay how you drive, where you have dynamic insurance premiums that actually either they'll penalize you for poor driving and they'll give you a lower premium if your driving is better. So you're going to pay for your behavior essentially. That's, to me, quite a good thing as well. One area that I think is absolutely key, and I think there'll be lots of different opportunities, is the whole area of personalization. Because I have the in-vehicle data from a platform like Ivy, and as I said, the vehicles are thrown off maybe 5 terabytes of data an hour. It's a lot of data. And when I combine that with the information I would have in the cloud for that customer, then I'm assuming that we have the customer's permission, but I'm able to bring that data together. And what I'm able to do then is to create much more precise, personalized offers for that consumer that they are much more likely to take up. Now, if I can get those offers into a subscription type finance format where I am subscribing on a regular basis, I don't know, something like you pay $10 a month that allows you to switch on different features in your vehicle, for example, then what that allows me to do is I can monetize the data for that vehicle over its entire life, and not just when it's been purchased or when it's been sold. Because, the average vehicle, say, on a fleet for 2-3 years, that's a tremendous opportunity. And we've seen the consumer behavior, and as we talked about the shift from ownership to usership. That's about subscription, at least to some extent. So that's a bit of an open door, and we need to be more creative about how we get to those offers. Now, those are all revenue generating opportunities, and there's loads more, but it's also important to look at the cost saving potential that this would have. Again, we talked about over-the-air updates. So if we think about, the average vehicle having 100 million lines of code on it, if the vehicle has an issue, then I can use the over-the-air capability to correct that issue in real time. That means I do not have to recall that vehicle for a physical recall, to go into a garage and get repaired or have software uploaded or whatever maintenance be done on the vehicle. That's a huge cost saving because vehicle recalls are expensive. And, because they're recalls, the OEM is paying for it, not the customer. Another area where you see some significant cost savings, there's a specialized part of the automotive finance business on what we call floor plan or wholesale, as it's known in different countries. And here, a key process within a wholesale business is a physical vehicle stock check, or audit as they call it. So they have people going around the country, going to forecourts or dealer garages to see, are there vehicles on the forecourt? What condition are they in? Or have they been moved? Now, with something again like the IV platform's connected vehicle data, I can have the vehicle self-audit. The vehicle itself knows where it is, knows where it's been moved, knows what condition it is, and can set up. So now I'm doing that for free. That's a significant saving. And finally, I would say, we're going to see the emergence of data marketplaces and the whole concept of data trading. There were things, I don't know if we want to get into it here. There was a concept a couple of years ago. We used to talk about the $0 car, where you would the OEM would trade an element of the price, the sticker price of the vehicle, so give you a price reduction in exchange for you handing over use of your data. And it wasn't that the OEM themselves were going to use that data directly, is what they could sell it onto, like in a data marketplace. Now, it's kind of a silly example. If I go to you and you're you're buying a car for, let's just say it's $20,000, and I say to you, I tell you what, if you allow me to have your vehicle data for the lifetime of this vehicle, or the lifetime you've got the vehicle, then I'll give you $1,000 off that car. And you say yes. So now what the OEM has, maybe 20,000 of their customers signed up for this, or maybe 100,000. Now I have this wiper data. So what value does that have? Well, I could go to a weather company who spend fortunes putting weather stations out on the countryside. But actually, if I'm sitting there and I can see there's a concentration of vehicles on a road in a particular area and all the wipers are going back and forth furiously, then I'm pretty damn sure it's raining hard, right? And that's probably a more accurate prediction of the weather than anything else, right? So I know it's a bit of a made up example, but that's something that I think may well make its way back, and would apply equally well on the finance side, because I might give you as an automotive finance company, I might give you a reduced monthly rental in exchange for use of your data, and I can monetize that data. So there's a bright future for this, in my view.
Yeah, I think it's a potential win-win for everyone.
Yeah,
and it's a very exciting future. And I thank you for sharing it with us, Brendan, and giving us a glimpse into your world and how it's going to affect our world. So thank you so much for being a guest on the show today.
Thank you very much, Steve. Love you to meet you. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Well, that's the end of our episode for today. But if you'd like to get more information on the topics or our guest, check out blackberry.com/podcast. Get in. The Connected Vehicle Podcast from BlackBerry is available wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe to keep up to date with our latest episodes.